fair to say that addicted or not, it has a disproportionate amount of real estate in your head. And that can be off-putting to your mate, and that could be something that they want you to take a look at.
Right.
I like it. Good advice.
One other thing, too, that I wanted to kind of bring up with this, with video gaming is there's not a whole lot of research out there yet looking at how it affects the body physically. Mm-hmm. But one thing I'm really interested in that I think might be an issue, and you're hearing it here first on Pod Therapy.
Copyright.
I'm really worried about what this is going to do physically. And here's what I mean by that is when you're playing a game, Call of Duty or something like that, you are submersed in the game. And the more that you feel involved in it, the better the game, right? So in a game like that, you are constantly surrounded with threats. Well, when a threat appears, it throws our body into fight or flight. But what happens when that happens repeatedly in a sedentary lifestyle, where there's never actually any physical movement once you get into that fight or flight?
Oh, so you don't metabolize the emotion.
Right. So it's like you're constantly being put into fight or flight, but there's never any actual movement that kind of releases some of that energy. I wouldn't be surprised if later on, 10, 15 years from now, we discover that if 10 or 15 years, this is causing health effects. Yeah,
yeah,
this
like
is
a
affecting,
kink in the hose.
Yeah, our heart, our cardiovascular system, things like that.
Well, if that happens, I will demand royalty payments, and we will make sure you get that Nobel Peace Prize, Nick. Or Nobel Prize, right, for neurochemistry. You heard it here first, folks.
I wouldn't know what to do with it if I won it. So
I think you just hang it on something. Hang it on the wall.
All right. Our next listener writes in, was I right to distance myself from my 2-year-old daughter? Well, I have been battling with pain pills and heroin addiction for the past 4 years. The past 2 years, it's basically consumed my life to the point I can't work or function without them because of withdrawals. I'd wake up and have to hustle money, steal, or whatever to get well and be happy. So about 3 months ago, I said enough is enough, and I moved about an hour away to my adoptive parents where I can't find pills. I've been clean for 3 months. Now all the emotions are flooding back in. I've been a terrible father. I've been so selfish and unfair to my little girl, taking her with me to pick up drugs and to the pawn shop to sell stolen stuff. I've never mistreated her, but I put drugs before my own flesh and blood. So I had to distance myself from her and the whole situation. My daughter is well taken care of with her grandparents. I just wanted some advice. Was leaving her the right thing to do?
I say yes. I think absolutely it was. I think you were going to lose your daughter. You're committing crime, and having substances in your system. So it's a matter of time before eventually you got busted or got caught driving. CPS takes your kid away. And also I would argue that if you're high with your children, you're not there anyway. And the version of you that's present, you're blind to it, but you're not as charming as you think you are. And you're not as useful as you think you are. And you're not as loving as you think you are. You're scary. You're out of it. You're in a trance. You're nodding off. And you're ignoring them anyway. So honestly, I congratulate him on, getting some measure of sobriety, putting some distance between him and, his family, because that's helpful. My response to that is I think you absolutely did the right thing. Do you still feel guilty about it? Yeah. Yeah, I think you get to feel guilty. I think you get to feel ashamed that you did this to your daughter or that you associated her with it. But that's not necessarily an unhelpful emotion. You could put that in your pocket, and that could actually help you stay sober. But it sounds like you're on your way, and I think that your daughter deserves to experience the sober and healthy version of you. When you can offer that to her, it's time to reconcile. But for right now, I think you're doing the right thing by giving her some distance. I don't know, Nick. That's my take. What do you think?
Well, I agree. And I think, first of all, it's important to just say congratulations and good job. Pat yourself on the back for, number one, recognizing that this is an issue, and number two, deciding to take action to do something about it. You've already gone further than most will with this problem. So that's good. Now, one thing I would like to add, there is no such thing as a geographical cure, right? So wherever you move, your addiction is going to move with you. Now, that being said, I don't think that this was a bad move by any means. I think that this was necessary. One of the things that we do with residential treatment when working with addiction, one of the things that I work with my clients on is learning to recognize internal vulnerabilities and external risk factors. Okay, so external risk factors would be things like my environment, going to events where there's drugs and alcohol, my social group, things like that. Internal vulnerabilities would look at things like things that I'm dealing with internally. Could be guilt, shame, trauma, just all of these things that are happening inside my own head, right? So by going into residential treatment or relocating, that can be helpful because essentially what you do is you cut off one half of that equation. You cut out the external piece so you can focus on the internal piece.
Right.
You bring the internal piece under control, and then we can look at the environment, right? But the internal piece has to be dealt with. So the move, I think, was a good idea. As far as distancing yourself from your daughter, that's tough. There's no easy way to deal with that. The one thing that I always like to say to any of my clients is I always say, recovery is an investment, right? Like any other investment, you are sacrificing something now for greater return later. And so if that means that right now you need to sacrifice some time with your daughter in order to get more time later, in order to be there when she graduates and walk her down the aisle when she gets married, if this is what you have to do to achieve that, then good for you. Then absolutely do that. One thing that I would warn you against would be to just be really honest with yourself and make sure that this isn't an avoidance tactic. I've seen that before too, where people will intentionally separate themselves from somebody who's very important to them because they say, well, I got to focus on my recovery, when really what they're doing is there's stress in this relationship. I feel guilt and shame about what's going on in this relationship. I don't want to deal with it. Right? As long as that's not what's driving this, then I think you're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And I like that piece that you said too, that you're doing the right thing as long as you're focusing on yourself right now and you're putting this time to good use. With the intention of coming back as a healthy father. And if you're out there, folks, and you're dealing with something and, you're thinking, gosh, I think I struggle with this issue or substance abuse or, video games or whatever problem has gotten out of control and out of balance in your life, let me just tell you something. It is never convenient to recover. It is just never going to be convenient. It's never going to be the right time. But now is the right time because, as Nick said, it's an investment. So it's a short-term sacrifice for the long-term gain. And we're talking the rest of your life and the rest of these relationships and the rest of your career. So I would advise you, do not wait. Do not take that time. Check in with a therapist. Right into the show, start to get some fact checks, some reality checks, some perspective, because it is really appropriate to deal with this in the here and now.
Absolutely.
All right. So we got our next question, Nick. I think this is a little bit more of a lighthearted one, but a good one. The question is, why does every guy, quote, not want a relationship, end quote? Here's what it says. I went on a date with this guy, and he's gorgeous. But literally, as soon as we sat down to eat, he tells me he doesn't want a relationship because travel or something, and that he cuts girls off when they get attached. In fact, he mentioned multiple times that he doesn't want a relationship. Yet, he texts me every morning, tonight, and calls me babe constantly, and screenshots my pictures on Snapchat. I told him I do want a relationship or to move towards one. Why don't guys want a relationship? What do you think there, Nick?
That's a tough question.
Is it tough? I think it's simple. I think it's very simple. And it's not what the listener thinks. I promise my answer is not what the average person's going to say.
Now I'm really interested to hear what your
I'm an enigma, Nick. I'm a man of mystery.
Okay, well, here's my initial reaction to this. You are part of this equation as well. Which means that you get to set the boundaries for yourself. You get to decide what is okay for you in a relationship and what is not. And it may come time to enforce those boundaries. So if you are getting the sense that, from what I read, you want a relationship, you're getting the sense that it sounds like you're getting mixed signals that he's saying no, he doesn't, and yet is acting as if there is a relationship, you have every right to draw the line and say, no, I'm not going to put up with this. This isn't what I'm looking for. And here's the thing. If he is not going to provide what you're looking for in a relationship, the longer you stay in this, the longer it prevents you from finding the one that will, right? So if he's not the one, move on.
Right.
Draw that line. And I hate to be the one to have to give you this advice because I know this isn't great advice to hear, but if he's not providing for you what you're looking for, then it's time to end that and try to find the one that will provide that.
All right.
Now, before let me go on, because there's one other thing as far as why men do this.
There it is.
That's a lot more difficult question.
That's where I'm coming from.
Why men do this? There could be a lot of different reasons. One reason that I'm thinking of is the word relationship may scare guys. In which case it's something that he wants, but it's not something that he can handle hearing himself verbalize. That could be part of it. There might just be some discomfort with him being alone, and maybe he doesn't want a relationship, or he wants a relationship, but he knows that he's not ready for a relationship. So in a sense, it's kind of like he's leaving the back door open so that when this falls apart, he can escape and say, well, I told you from the beginning that I didn't want this.
Yeah. So I'm going to give up the game on this one. All the fellows are like cringing, like, don't say it, Jim, don't say it. But I'm doing it, guys. I'm telling them. So here's what the women don't know. So her question is, why do guys, plural, right? Why do all these guys on all these different platforms seem to not be looking for a relationship? All right, here's the deal. Guys are much more emotionally brittle than I think they let on. Women have a lot more mental, I think, flexibility in their ability to sort of like ride the wave and go with it and change the definition of things and sort of, get along. Guys, not so much. And so for a guy, whenever they come in and say, listen, I'm not looking for a relationship, it kind of goes back to what Nick said. It's sort of this exit where it's like, okay, you can't hurt me because I'm not available for a relationship, right? So we're just keeping it casual. You can upgrade from that position into a relationship if you, quote, meet the right girl, right? But by broadcasting that you're not available for it, it means that I'm not going to emotionally invest in this. I have sort of like my own guard up, and that way I'm protected. So I think there's A, that. But B, that is attractive. Like it or not, when a guy says, hey, I'm not really looking for anything, every girl's like, I'm up to the challenge, and like, I'm going to be the one that you want to be with. Whereas if a guy comes in and goes, yeah, I'm really looking to find the right girl, I just want to marry her and have 10 kids, like, that's a lot. And so like for the girl, it's like, oh, okay, like the stakes of this are much higher, and so it doesn't allow the breathing room. So I think that guys who've been playing this game for a while, they've learned that it's advantageous to them emotionally and advantageous to the possibility of the relationship to just sort of come in and say, oh yeah, I'm not really looking for anything, and then sort of let you sell them. The same way they buy a car. Like they come in and they go, I'm not really looking to buy a car today, but I just thought I'd browse the models. Well, now the salesman's like, oh, let me cut you a deal. Right. Like, let me get you into something you'll really like. And I think that sort of carries into the relationship dating game in a similar way.
Okay, I can see where you're coming from. So then in either of these situations, I think our advice on how to handle this would probably be similar, in which what I would say, again, is going back to the boundaries thing, but have a discussion. Just have an open discussion about, like, I know you're saying that you don't want a relationship, yet this is what I'm noticing. Help me understand this, because these don't seem to line up. Right, having that open dialogue, having that discussion, and just being able to figure out a plan on where everybody is at. It may not be a bad idea to kind of check in and see maybe his position. Yeah,
I think you got to state your own needs, and it sounds like she has. She's told him, I want a relationship, and he's saying, yeah, I'm not really available for that. But I don't know, clarify. I mean, I think if you want to know how to break our game, the way that you can break into the guy world here and win this game of checkers or chess is to just come in and say, oh, let me ask you this. Are you available for a relationship if you meet the right girl? And if they go, oh, yeah, if I met the right girl, okay, good. That was the answer you were really looking for, right? But it still allows him the emotional, boundary to sort of say, but I'm not leaning forward yet. And that's totally fine. Then just let it grow naturally from there. But you've agreed that it's a possibility. And as long as you have that, I think you have all you need to start a conversation, to get to know the person. And then you can have another hard conversation later when you've been dating for a while. And it's like, hey, do you want to make this official? And what does that look like? But you kicked it down the road. But for right now,